Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about eating your own dog food. What do I mean by this? I did a video a while back on how much developers should play games. A lot of people thought I was talking about playing their own games, but I was talking about just playing games in general. And one commenter said, no, developers should eat their own dog food. And this is a phrase I've heard for decades. I work with a producer who's been saying it forever. And what it means is, if you make a game, you should be playing that game. Often they mean before it ever ships. But I also think that people should play their own games after they ship, because you would be surprised at what remained unpolished or unfinished or just wrong, like a bad design or bad implementation. I've mentioned here that I have not one but two games that shipped an earlier build by their publisher. Like, I was literally holding a CD with a more recent build that fixed bugs, in some case egregious bugs, in some case bugs that showed up in the very opening cinematic. But publisher's like, no, I'm shipping the earlier version because we got to get this thing out the door. Doesn't mean I wanted those bugs, doesn't mean I stopped playing. If you play your game after it ships, that can guide what patches you want to do, in addition to what people are reporting is wrong. But it also can guide you on future games. If you keep playing this game and you're like, we didn't quite nail this pillar, on your next game you can go, okay, I know what we did wrong here, let's fix that. However, that is not to say that everyone else in the game industry does this. I would say most people do. Most developers play the game before it ships. A lot of them play it after. Some don't, but many do. Here are the reasons. I'm going to give you the reasons in no particular order. Reasons people have told me why they do not play the game they're working on. Some of these are valid. Some are not. Some are just pure excuses. You can decide for yourself which ones are which. I'll go over the 5 now. The first one. Some people don't play the game they're working on because they don't really play games at all. I know it's the in thing right now is to think that developers obviously don't play games. Most of them do, and most of them play the game they're working on. But there are some that don't. And I've talked about this in a video I did a while back called Jobs, Careers, or Callings. There are a lot of people in the industry to whom it is just a job. It is their 9 to 5 work. And when they're done for the day, they go home and they don't think about what they did at work. And this is okay. I've mentioned you need a whole mix of people. We've talked about it here where I think, young people and experienced people need to be mixed on a team. And people who think it's a job versus people who think it's a career versus people who think it's a calling. I think they all have a place on a team. A mixed team is a better team than a homogeneous one. The only thing you want homogeneity in is what game you're making. You should all be making the same game. If you're trying to make a different game, you're just going to pull the game to shreds. This leads to the second point. So you, like I said, so people who just never think about the game. They go in, they do their features, or they do whatever's assigned to them, and then they leave. There's a second reason people don't play the game they're making, and that is because they literally don't have time. Back when we used to do crunch, it became you were given 8 hours of work a day. So if you didn't finish it, you worked more than 8 hours. But if you wanted to play the game to see how things were proceeding, you were going to crunch. You were going to stay late. You were going to come in on the weekend so you could play it. That was just a non-issue. If you really cared about the game, that's what you did. Now, I would say, now that work-life balance has become more of a thing, there are a lot of people who don't play the game because they're never assigned time to do so. Whoever's assigning their work, their lead, the director, the producer, is probably assuming, well, these people are going to play the game. No. If you give them a day to make a feature and it takes them 6 hours to even implement it, they may spend an hour or two looking to see that feature in the game, but they're not playing the game like a game player at home would play it, starting at the beginning, making a character, seeing when that feature naturally arises. No, they're jumping right to where that feature would occur, looking at it and going, okay, that UI looks good, that animation looks good, that frame rate looks good, I'm done. Third reason people don't play their own games. They get burned out, or if you prefer, they're just exhausted. They literally can't anymore. They're so wiped from all the stuff they have to do that the idea of spending 30 minutes of downtime at work spinning up the game and playing it, they can't even. And if you've ever been burned out, you know what this feels like. You just yeah, you could click that button and be playing the game, but what you really need to do is not be looking at this screen for 15 minutes. What you really need to do is not be thinking about, work for 15 minutes. So they don't. Fourth reason, you can get too close to the game. You can have a game that you're working on so long that you literally don't see the issues anymore. You're playing the game and you don't notice the bad animations. You don't notice the frame rate stuttering. You don't notice a perk that is so bad that no one ever takes it. Instead, maybe you've reported these things and then you moved on. So you mentioned it, in a report to QA or something, and then you moved on to the other things, and you voluntarily are blinding yourself to those features. You assume they're going to get fixed. But sometimes you've just worked on a game for so long that you don't notice these things anymore. When I talked about hiring QA, I said one reason it's nice to get fresh QA in is after a few months, a lot of people in QA get too close because they play it all day, every day, and they don't see these issues anymore. Which brings me to the fifth reason people don't play their own games. And this one is called knowing how the sausage is made. It's another phrase like eating your own dog food. What happens is you've been working on the game for a long time. You've been involved in a lot of parts of it. The magic is gone. You know all the little tricks that are going on in the scaffolding. You know that what the game player will see is amazing reactivity, occurs in very specific places that are triggered on particular variables. And it doesn't happen too frequently, but it'll happen enough that people go, wow, this game is really reactive. And to you, you see it for what it is. A shortcut, a half measure. This is different than the fourth one, where you're too close and now you're not noticing anything anymore. This fifth one, knowing how the sausage is made, you see it. In fact, you see things so clearly that there can be things in there that would be really fun to the game player who's playing the game for the first time. But because you see it as a shortcut, as a half measure, as you see the rickety scaffolding holding this together, you're like, I don't even know anymore. I don't know if people are going to like this. I'm tired of it. That happens a lot. In fact, when it happens with the people in charge, that's when they often start switching to other features or they want to make new content because they're bored with what's in there, but the person buying the game won't be bored. The person buying the game has never seen this before. But after you've seen it for 3 years, you're like, we need to change this. So knowing how the sausage is made, after a while, sometimes people just stop playing. I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to see all the scaffolding anymore. So, I don't agree with any of these reasons, by the way. And you probably don't agree with a lot of them. I've played all the games that I shipped. If I was working at that company when the game shipped, I played it before and after it shipped. And that's true for all of my games. Sometimes I've been on teams where no one's played the game more than me, except the people on QA. Because, of course, their job is to play all day, every day. I have a video, and I'll link it below, on the 8 full playthroughs I did of The Outer Worlds. I actually did more than that. I think I did 16. But I don't have detailed notes on what those other 8 were. So I made the video on those 8. And just if you think I'm just talking about video games, this, not eating your own dog food happens way outside the game industry. I use some software, different software. I use video processing software. I use word processors. I use consoles. I use music streaming apps. All of them have some issue with them that I wonder, did the engineers that made this actually use this app? I have a whole video about redesigning a non-game, and in that case, it was a modern music streaming app, because I was so frustrated with how every single modern music app streaming app works. Watch the video below, and particularly, I have to, every time I use any music streaming app, I wonder, are the designers, engineers using this? Because it's incredibly frustrating to use. And a quick sidebar, you could go watch that video on redesigning a non-game app, which is about music streaming apps, and look at all my frustrations. I've discovered new frustrations since making that. I went back to some old playlists that I made a few years ago that have hundreds of songs in them to discover half a dozen songs are broken links now. They don't play. Why? Maybe the musician remastered the song, and when it got swapped out, they don't bother fixing those links. The link to the old song is gone because the song is deleted. And I don't have a link to the new one. So it's frustrating because if there was an option, I would select, if a song gets replaced with another version, link me to the new version. And maybe give me a pop-up the next time I use the playlist, like the following songs have been relinked because they have newer versions. And then I can optionally delete them. But just removing the link, making a broken link, when I'm listening to it on my headphones, I don't see those broken links. No messages come up, nothing. I have to go and look at the playlist visibly and scroll down, and there's hundreds in one of mine, to get to a spot where I see, oh, broken link. So anyway, the not eating your own dog food continues while outside the game industry. And all this boils down to, it's the difference between using an app or playing your game for a few minutes or even a few hours versus years, or in some cases decades, of looking at your own stuff. I look back at stuff in Fallout, I look back at stuff in Arcanum and Temple and go, I would not do that these days. I didn't notice it back then. So, bottom line of all this about eating your own dog food. If you make something, take some pride in it and use it, there are probably things you can fix. And that's it.